Welcome back to Saturday Social World. We are joined by Buvey and Nieve. Now, Joe, there's been a bit of chat, I'd say. Obviously, it's International Week.
So International Week.
Slightly more difficult coming up with items. But there has been a bit of chat, obviously, about where most Salah ranks in terms of Premier League greats. And also, a bit of chat about some of the great Premier League players that are out of contract or that might be leaving quite soon. So I thought it was a good time to look at the greatest ever Premier League 11. Few rules, but it's quite straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
We kind of want to know how many of the current sort of greats get into the greatest ever 11. Each guest has brought their own Premier League greatest of all time 11 to the table. You're going to debate position by position. The best argument is going to come out on top. So let's see, in your goalkeeper department, are any current Premier League greats getting in the greatest ever? Buvey, they are for you. Alisson.
Wow. Yeah, I had to do it. I know it's a bit biased after, kind of recency bias after the Champions League performance. I think Alisson's got better distribution than Schmeichel. Hasn't got the same legacy, obviously way less titles. I think he's an equally good shot stopper. So I'm talking the highest level I've seen. I think Alisson's the best keeper I've ever seen. I think even Peter Cech's slightly ahead of Schmeichel.
Really?
Yeah.
It's interesting how in your argument, though, you mentioned Peter Schmeichel twice, almost knowing that that's the benchmark you're comparing keepers to, and that is who you've gone with, Nieve.
And I think that's interesting where you put that. I think because obviously Manchester United were so dominant in the 90s, and I think for a goalkeeper to be so core to almost a full decade of dominance in a team, he just changed goalkeeping. And I think he's one of the faces of the 90s of the Premier League. I think it's like his legacy. And it's not just your attributes of a goalkeeper, you know, things like shot stopping, which Schmeichel could do, and also his distribution was really good in a time when that wasn't really something that goalkeepers were thought of for. It's also that intimidating presence. I don't think I've ever seen a goalkeeper like that since. And his leadership, his organisation of the defensive front of him, and just, his huge involvement in Manchester United's success in that decade.
Yeah, I think Alisson's that kind of... He's got the Schmeichel-esque qualities about him, but in the modern era, I think his distribution's far better than Schmeichel's. Obviously, they're playing in different eras. I just think he's a high-level goalkeeper, Alisson, in my opinion.
Is anybody willing to concede?
No, look, he's won so many titles. I love Schmeichel. I can't have a whole side of Man United players. I think Alisson competes really close to
So
Peter
is that
Schmeichel.
your reason? Because you don't want United players in there? Is that why you don't want Schmeichel?
No, I think there's a justified reason that Alisson, but you can't just do titles with Man United because Man United won so many titles and fair play to
No,
Schmeichel.
not at all. It's not because of the titles. It's because of his involvement in that. I think you look at like him and Keane. I think there was such a huge. They're the names that constantly will crop up as so important to that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I think he came in and there's a transformation of Manchester United.
I think it's two good arguments, but I think Schmeichel edges it.
OK.
Let's stick Schmeichel down.
Is there going to be a disagreement at right back? Presumably, Booth, you're backing your man?
No.
Oh, dear.
I can't. I mean, I love Kyle Walker. The biggest thing you could ever say about Kyle Walker is he gets so close to Gary Neville. I think he had a better England career than Gary Neville. Mark Kylian Mbappe out of the game in the World Cup. Vinicius Jr. in the Champions League. Kyle Walker is so underrated. He's a generational right back. But Gary Neville's still better. I mean, Gary Neville is so underrated. His positional ability, his leadership. He was good on the ball as well. Not a bad cross with the ball and decent going up and down the flank, obviously.
I think it's weird with Gary Neville. I think because with players, we like to have if they've got a standout trait. I think because Gary Neville didn't necessarily have a standout trait, but he was just so good at everything that he was good at.
Yeah.
I think that's where people underrate him a little bit. But 19 years of what he did.
That's crazy.
I think, a lot of people have Gary Neville in their best team. One thing I'll say just for balance for Kyle Walker, do you think it's harder in this era, though, being a fullback than it was in that era? Gary Neville himself has spoken about the job as a fullback then was to defend. Fullbacks now are inverting. They're expected to score goals, get assists. The role of a modern fullback seems to be more difficult than it was perhaps then.
But then I think the forwards in the 90s and the early 2000s that Gary Neville was playing against, and you never felt that Gary Neville got caught out against them. I mean, there were way better forwards in that generation for Gary Neville.
I don't disagree with that, no.
But Kyle Walker's done it in his own era as well. So they're very, very close to each other, in my opinion.
OK, let's have a look at you said about pairing. See if there's any disagreement. Any modern players? Any current Premier League greats? There are for Nieve. Nieve, you've gone VVD and JT. You've gone Rio and JT. So there's an agreement on John Terry, first and foremost.
Yeah, John Terry's the best centre-back in the history of the Premier League. I think even his goal scoring in big seasons for Chelsea when they won the title. He was the captain 10 years apart when winning the title as well. Unbelievable.
I think that's a punchy statement. JT, the best centre-back ever, when you've got Van Dijk and Rio in your hands as well. I think a lot of people would have these two maybe even ahead of him.
Do you agree, Nieve? Who's the best centre-back in Premier League history for you?
I think I would still personally say Terry because he had that sort of toughness and putting his body on the line nature, but then he was super comfortable on the ball.
Yeah.
Great diagonals as well. But yeah, no, I've gone with Van Dijk next to him.
Yeah, it's like the Schmeichel thing with Alisson. I think Rio is. I think he's got more quality than Van Dijk in terms of off the ball, on the ball. I think he's right up there. He's 10 out of 10. Van Dijk, for me, he's only won one Premier League title so far. He obviously won a second this season. I just think Rio's legacy is so much better than Van Dijk.
On this debate as well, like to your point, I know we're talking about the role of maybe the fullback being you had to do more, but your point, I think a lot of people would agree with, is the type of centre forward that Rio is up against of a higher level than the type of centre forward Van Dijk's up against now, do you think?
I don't think you can answer that personally. I think for every 10 strikers you could name back then that were good, you could name 10 now that were good.
I don't know.
And
He's playing against Henry. Do you know what I mean? He even played probably against Aguero and Tevez.
But these are not.
guys.
I don't think that if we were sort of arguing and making our teams across eras, I don't think that's an argument that you can make because we don't know. Whereas I think if you were to build an individual and you were to build the perfect centre back, all of the attributes that make a perfect centre back, who would you get? I think you would get Van Dijk. And I think one of the real key things that maybe Van Dijk has over to Rio Ferdinand in the later years is that availability as well. And I think that comes from the fact that if you take Van Dijk's ACL season out, pretty much every game, every season, this season and last season played the most minutes for Liverpool of any player in that Liverpool team. And I think the reason he's able to do that is because Van Dijk's able to play so cleverly. So you see those little bursts of acceleration he does when you think maybe an attacker's got the better of him, and all of a sudden he has a little burst of acceleration and he makes the tackle. Doesn't need to go to ground, but he makes the tackle and he's comfortable. And I think when attackers talk about Van Dijk, there's fear in their tone when they're talking about him. He's got something about him because I think people can't wrap their head around the fact that he's got everything that you would want in a player.
Need a decision, Joe? What are you saying?
I mean, I would always side with Rio, but that's the bias in me.
Rio Ferdinand was part of a great partnership, right, with Vidic, who deserves a mention, by the way. And I think that you think about all the great centre-backs, they're part of great partnerships, whereas Van Dijk's the one centre-back where I think you could slot him into any of those partnerships and it would be the same, if not better.
That is a really interesting point.
What are you saying? You want to go Rio?
We gave Nieve Peter Schmeichel. Do we give Buvey?
That can't be.
This guy's playing against Alan Shearer week in, week out.
I think maybe the argument of to Buvey's the level of strike he was coming up against. Also, what I would say is Van Dijk, PFA Team of the Year 4 times, which is actually a good metric of individual performance. Rio Ferdinand, Team of the Year 6 occasions. So I think this is impossible. Let us know what you think, Holmes. Joe, we edge your Rio?
Yeah.
Go on, edge your Rio,
I'm
Joe.
using my bias here to select Rio. I can
yeah.
see the comments at home saying that is ridiculous, and I totally
You could
understand.
have either. It's a toss of a coin. I think left-back, for me, is the biggest tap-in maybe
Just
of
put
any
him out.
position.
Yeah.
Easy.
Greatest left-back.
Honestly. There's nobody comes close to Ashley Cole. Let's do your first midfielder then, Stevie G. Both of you have got an agreement on Steven Gerrard, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Is he the best midfielder in Premier League history?
For me, he is. I think he gets in even ahead of De Bruyne, Vieira, Scholes. I think his ability to influence the game in every aspect, scoring big goals, leadership, off the ball, defensive ability off the ball is underrated for Steven Gerrard.
Yeah.
Agree,
He's the best well-rounded midfielder in the history of the Premier League.
I think it's fascinating. You know, in the noughties, you had the money and the squad size of Chelsea and Arsenal and United. Liverpool finished in the top 3 5 times between that end of that 2000 season and 2009. And I just think with the squad they have for them to do that, it's not talked about enough. They were right up there with them, and I think, he's a big.
I would agree with that as well. I think if you look at all the other midfielders, the team that he was playing and the amount of work he had to do, compared to the other midfielders in the squad.
Should we see the next two as a pair? See if there's any agreement, any disagreement in your other two midfielders?
Because there's not a lot of recent players, is there? Not a lot of current players so far.
Not a lot of current players, but there is
now.
An agreement on KDB.
I like that. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think De Bruyne's so underrated for what he could do. His numbers are exceptional. He's influenced so many different seasons, 6 Premier League titles, unplayable on his day.
Yeah. Just the sheer output now for 10 years. And do you remember he had that injury and then he came back last season against Newcastle? Straight away he slots on bottom left and then he sets up Oscar Bob with that just inch-perfect pass. And that just sums him up.
So we talk about output. Has he, you think, overtaken what I would describe as the output midfield machine, which is Frank Lampard, who, ridiculous goal-scoring numbers, ridiculous output. So we're saying KDB, in terms of that, is overtaking him, you think?
Yeah, I think De Bruyne can control a game of football. I think the midfield selection, for me, it's always about control. Obviously, Paul Scholes gets close to that as well, but De Bruyne can control a game of football. Lampard, a fantastic passer of the ball and great leadership. He couldn't dictate a game of football like De Bruyne could, in my opinion.
OK, so KDB's in agreement, so let's put him up, and then we can have the Scholes v Keane debate.
Yeah, it's just about preference, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think he's better off the ball for me, Keane, than Scholes.
No, to be honest, like you say, it's about preference. I think perhaps yours would make more sense in creating the midfield sort of balance. But for me, Paul Scholes, I just think he was such a delight to watch. You know, it's just exciting. Every time, a bit sort of similar to De Bruyne in a sense when he played higher up the pitch. Every time he got the ball, you knew he was about to do something. You know, he was about to look up, go forward and do something straight away. And then when he started to drop a little bit deeper, we saw that he could control games. So he had all these different elements, but everything he did was just with such style and brilliance.
When he came out of retirement and controlled the game against Man City in the derby, and he was wearing like £5 boots, it was just like
some of the goals that he scored as well. Like, you're
One
just
against
thinking, how is
Barcelona.
he?
I think these are both great shouts. Personally, I think I'd edge Scholes. You're the United fan. What do you say?
Scholes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Scholes it is. So now we go on to this. We go right wing first.
This is a big debate.
This is a big debate that is raging everywhere. Mo Salah or Cristiano Ronaldo in an all-time Premier League 11. Nieve, you can go first.
Yeah, I think what I will say between these two, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Ronaldo because I know how unbelievable he is, but Premier League Ronaldo versus Premier League Mo Salah, are you sure?
Well, Ronaldo won basically the Ballon d'Or in the Premier League, 3 Premier League wins in a row, won the Champions League. His individual performances. The Premier League's never seen anything like Cristiano Ronaldo in his prime. I know it lasted a very short time, went to Real Madrid, arguably was better even then at Real Madrid. If you think Salah's a better footballer than Ronaldo, I can't believe it.
I'm not saying that. I'm creating a Premier League all-time 11.
Yeah.
And you'd say the 07-08 season, 08-09 season, superb. 17-18, 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, 21-22, 23-24, 24-25.
How many league titles in that period you just said?
Why are we using league titles? It's a team sport.
It's an important thing. It's an important thing.
Have you
Especially at the top end of the pitch.
Have you got Henry in your team?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
so he'll have the same amount of Premier League as Henry this year.
Yeah, at the moment he's only got 1 Premier League title.
But he's about to have
Officially speaking, Ronaldo is the best player in the history of the Premier League. Period. Do you know what I mean? He is the best player in the history of the Premier League. The goal against Portsmouth, the free kick, the technical bit. He's got better technical ability, better goal scoring record, better legacy. He's more physical. He's a better total footballer. This is the second best player in the history of football, let alone in the Premier League.
Do you think at some level that it becomes a debate between sort of output, which is just numbers and volume and scale, and like ability to a little bit of a level? Obviously, we've had the debate over the years, haven't we? Salah versus Hazard. It feels like that's definitely gone Salah's way, but now it feels a little bit like, you know, it's hard to compare because the numbers are so different.
Yeah,
but
it's hard, and it's also hard to compare because this was his sort of bursting onto the scene moment with Ronaldo, and he was then to go on to be what he is. We saw it just at the end with the Ballon d'Or, and then he goes on and he goes to Real Madrid. Whereas Mo Salah, you'd expect, because he's come into the Premier League as he's entering his peak, straight away scores 32 goals in his first season in the Premier League, and then just elevates. And we're seeing the best years of him. And so, therefore, you know, I'm not doing it to be unfair to Ronaldo, but we just so happen to get those years in the Premier League.
His best year, Salah's best year, doesn't lace Ronaldo's worst year in the Premier League. It simply doesn't. Except for the year when he came in as a young kid. I'm talking the 3-year period where he was the best player in the league for 3 years, went for a record fee. There's not an aspect of Salah's game that you could say is better than Ronaldo's. Maybe he's got a better left foot because of, you know, biology or whatever, but Ronaldo's entire game is better than Salah.
But I also think that what you've got to remember is that we are making a Premier League 11, right? It's just a Premier League. And I just think a player that for this is his 8th season
with 1 title
of pure consistency. But we've already
one in
knocked
8
down
versus
that.
what 4 in 5.
Well, it won't be
4
1 in
6?
8 though. It'll be 2 in 8.
2 in 8. So that's 1 every 4 years. This guy won three in a row.
Was it just Ronaldo who won the title?
I'd say he was number 1 player.
Or it's a team sport.
Yeah, Mane was important.
I don't want to use titles to make
let's
that
take away
decision.
titles.
We've got Gerrard in our 11 for goodness sake.
Let's take away titles. Ronaldo, on a technical basis, is far better than Salah in every metric, except maybe the left foot debate because he's a left footer. Every metric Ronaldo's better.
But I think we are building a Premier League 11, and I think someone who's got 8 seasons of being one of the standout names in a division for 8 seasons straight. Few seasons in there where you'd say, oh, is he the best player in the division, including this season. I think that has to count for something. We're making a divisions 11.
Are either of you happy to concede?
No way, this is Ronaldo. This is Ronaldo.
Okay, Buvey.
You're going to have to decide because I'm so biased.
Are you going Ronaldo?
United. I would always pick Ronaldo. I've never seen anything like it.
I think this is almost impossible. I do get Nieve's argument about the fact that, you know, longevity and maybe Ronaldo's best years at Real Madrid, but he did win a Ballon d'Or at United. So, do we edge for Ronaldo?
Come
Let's
on.
edge for Ronaldo. I think previously we've done this in
That's
edge
gonna
for
go down
Salah.
well.
So
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
probably
yeah.
mentioned that I picked Salah over Ronaldo 4 weeks ago.
I think your other two forwards, there's an agreement on, so we can see those.
That's easy, isn't
Oh,
it?
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, easy. I mean, Rooney, probably the best English player in the English Premier League of all time. As a total footballer, you could argue he's got the same amount of ability as Ronaldo. Didn't hit the same numbers, had to do different jobs, different roles. But Rooney almost transcended Premier League football. He is the icon of Premier League football.
Yeah.
Okay, stick
Okay.
them
So let's
both up then.
Stick them both up.
Yep.
Thierry Henry, obviously, no shouts for Shearer in here, given that we were speaking
All-time Premier League
about
scorer?
output from Mo Salah over a massive amount of time, but it doesn't make your 11 Shearer.
No, I think it's what you want, isn't it, in the team? I think with the reason why I chose Rooney was because I think he showed that he could score the goals when he was playing exclusively in that striker position. You know, he is the third all-time top scorer in the division. But then he also showed that he could be an all-round player and play a bit deeper as well. And I really loved with Rooney, it's testament to that he would be willing to be whatever United needed him to be, was that he built so many good relationships with different players. Like, you always think, like, who's Rooney's best player that he played with? Is it Tevez? Is it Ronaldo? Is it Javier Hernandez? Is it Ruud van Nistelrooy? You know, because he did what he needed to do to complement each player. I think, it's unbelievable.
Great player. And Henry, I think, as most would agree, is a tap-in. So stick him up, and that concludes our 11. It's a good job. We shouted out some of the names, the Lampards, the Shearers, the Kanes, that didn't make the team, Beckhams as well. But there is confirmation.
Rodri,
Nieve and
didn't get a
Buvey's
shout out.
Rodri as well, yeah. But it's just solid 11, that.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think
Impossible,
of that at home. Not easy.
No
yeah.
Mo Salah. That's going to go down well.
Yeah. Let us know. Give us your thoughts.
That's gonna
Time
go
now
down
for
well.
a quick break.